Hey guys, tonight we're bundling up for a frosty little journey through time, one that smells faintly of wood smoke, unwashed wool, and hot metal. You're standing ankle deep in crunchy alpine snow. The sun hasn't even peeked over the jagged peaks yet, but the camp is already stirring. You can hear the soft clink of belt buckles, the flap of canvas, the mumbled cursing in half a dozen dialects. There's a fire smoldering somewhere off to your left, and someone's already boiling something. Probably socks, honestly. You're a Swiss mercenary, early 1500s. You're technically employed by a noble whose name you can't quite pronounce, but really you're loyal only to your regiment. Your clothes are stiff with cold, your boots feel like frozen leather coffins, and your fingers are so numb you can barely lace up your doublet. And yet you still have to look presentable, because a wrinkled uniform might get you mocked, or fined, or worse, sent to clean the latrines. You probably won't survive this winter, let alone the next campaign. But hey, at least your sleeves are crisp. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake after all this, drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is over there. I love knowing how far these sleepy little stories travel. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Sorry, dude. It's freezing for starters. You're huddled in a wool blanket perched on a rock that definitely wasn't made for sitting. Your breath puffs out in thick, ghostly clouds. Around you, fellow soldiers stomp and stretch, trying to coax feeling back into their extremities. Someone sneezes violently. Someone else laughs and throws a snowball half-heartedly. The camaraderie is real, but so is the cold. You dream of socks that aren't wet and meals that don't crunch. The camp is laid out with a certain rustic efficiency, neat rows of tents, piles of firewood, and long trenches carved out for cooking waste and occasionally training. Somewhere a captain is already barking orders, mostly to no one in particular. His voice carries through the morning stillness like a crow with a megaphone. And you're lacing up your breeches, muttering under your breath about the icy sting of the laces. You slept in your uniform again, mostly because stripping down felt like suicide in that mountain air. But even so, everything has to be in order. No stains, no saggy knees, no wonky buttons. It's a funny thing how much pride the Swiss put into looking sharp before a battle, or even before breakfast. The belief is simple: a man who dresses with discipline fights with discipline. It's an ethos drilled into you the moment you join the company. Sloppy clothes suggest a sloppy mind, and sloppy minds don't come back from battle. There's also a practical angle. A neat uniform made you look like you belonged. Mercenary life was chaotic at the best of times. Different dialects, shifting alliances, new employers every few months. But a clean, coordinated group of men that earned respect, and sometimes even hesitation from your enemies. You take a moment to inspect your tunic. Its thick wool dyed a muted red that's seen better days. The collar is a bit frayed, but the stitching's solid. You run your hand over the pleats and try to smooth them out with your palm. No good. You'll need heat for that. A pot clangs behind you, someone's heating water over one of the communal fires. Not for coffee, mind you, just for warmth, and maybe if they're lucky to splash on their face. You wander toward the fire, hoping to do the same. You hold your tunic toward the flame, shifting it slightly so the worst wrinkles bake out. This is what passes for ironing, by the way: fire, steam, and a little hope. Across the way you spot Hans, the guy with the ridiculous mustache, meticulously brushing his britches with a twig. Not because they're dirty, but because there's a bit of lint near the cuff. He's muttering about how a man's ankles say everything. You nod. Sure, Hans, whatever gets you through. The Swiss didn't invent the concept of uniformity in warfare, but they certainly elevated it. The logic went something like this: when everyone looks equally intimidating, no one gets singled out. And when the enemy can't tell which of you is the captain, their strategy falls apart. It worked more often than you'd think. That said, there's always some dissent in the ranks. Historians still argue whether this early obsession with pressed sleeves and matching hose came from pure military strategy, or if it was just an elaborate excuse to show off in front of French peasants. Honestly, both theories hold water. You warm your hands over the flame again, feeling the blood creep back into your fingertips. Nearby, a group is rehearsing basic drills with wooden pikes, stepping in rhythm, stabbing the air like angry dancers. Their clothes are pristine, their movements less so. Somewhere behind you, a man slips on the ice and curses so fluently it could be mistaken for poetry. You smile. It's going to be a long day. But you look good, and that counts for something. Drills begin at sunrise, but somehow you're always already late. There's no trumpet or bugle to wake you, just the slow groan of the mountain sky turning gray and the sound of boots crunching toward the training field. It's not even a real field, just a stretch of half-thawed dirt trampled smooth by weeks of footwork and bad footing. You tighten your belt, shove your half-damp sleeves under your jerkin, and jog stiffly to join the rest. Forming up is its own kind of ballet. You take your place in the block shoulder to shoulder with men who smell roughly the way you do, like smoked sour wine and old goat leather. There's very little talking. Just a nod here, a sideways glance there. Everyone's still half asleep, blinking against the cold, waiting for the captain's voice to drop like a hammer. He doesn't disappoint. Posture, he barks, already pacing. Chins up back, straight tunics neat. I see one more sagging hem, and I'll personally teach you how to starch a shirt with your own tears. You straighten. Instinct, fear, or both. See, Swiss mercenary companies in the 1500s weren't just a group of thugs with pointy sticks. They were a reputation, a brand. Crisp lines and coordinated formations were their version of a logo. And just like a modern army cares about polished boots and tucked-in shirts, your commanders care deeply, maybe unreasonably, about how you look when you thrust a halberd into someone. Even during drills, inspection is constant. As you shuffle through the steps, advance, brace, pivot, retreat, you feel eyes on you. Is your jerkin too loose? Are your hose properly tucked into your boots? Is your collar sitting flat? It's less like war prep and more like walking a very muddy runway. Discipline was everything. The Swiss were paid well, relatively speaking, but they earned it through endless repetition. They drilled constantly, sometimes for hours at a time, just to get one maneuver looking sharp. And if you think that sounds dull, try doing it in wool leggings with a hangover. Hold, the captain yells. Everyone freezes mid-march. A boot lands in a puddle with an unceremonious squish. He walks the line slowly, fingers behind his back, inspecting every man like a tailor, reviewing his latest creation. You don't move. You barely breathe. He stops in front of Klaus' young guy, big ears, suspiciously clean fingernails. The captain narrows his eyes and reaches out to tug on Klaus' sleeve. The hem gives a little tug, uneven, slightly frayed. You call this uniform, the captain says, his voice low and dangerous. Do I look like your laundress? Klaus swallows audibly. Later you'll hear that he spent the afternoon re-washing all his linens in the river. Twice, in armor. You shift slightly, trying not to wrinkle your own sleeves. The scrutiny might seem over the top, but there's a method here. A wrinkle, after all, could hide a tear. A tear could mean vulnerability. And in battle, even small vulnerabilities can cost lives. This obsession with detail wasn't unique to the Swiss, but they took it to new levels. The Holy Roman Empire, France, Italy, everyone hired Swiss mercenaries. Not just because they were strong and well-trained, but because they looked intimidating. Polished boots, matching hose, tunics so neatly creased they could double as table settings. What no one tells you, though, is how much time it takes. Hours each day spent scrubbing, brushing, drying, reheating, and yes, ironing in a fashion. And it's not like you have irons just lying around in a supply tent. No, that'd be too easy. You remember once on a campaign in Burgundy when someone found an actual pressing iron in an abandoned manor house. You took turns using it like it was a sacred relic. That iron passed from man to man with reverence like a holy object. But most mornings you settle for hot stones, the flat side of a kettle, or if you're desperate, sitting on your tunic until the wrinkles flatten under body heat. It's not elegant, but neither is war. Drill's done, the captain finally shouts, and you drop your halberd like it's made of lead. Your arms ache, your legs feel like boiled cabbage, and you're starving. But hey, your pleats are holding nicely. You shuffle back to camp where someone's made a weak broth out of onions, barley, and what might have once been meat. You sip it from a dented tin bowl, steam fogging your already red face. It tastes like history, warm and thin. Nearby, a group of soldiers compare shirt cuffs. Mines cleaner says one lifting a wrist like a duchess showing off lace. Another man counters, yours smells like sheep. Try again. You laugh, quietly, because honestly, they're both right. Historians still debate whether this legendary discipline stemmed from military necessity or a uniquely Swiss sense of collective pride. Maybe it's both. Maybe when your homeland is a patchwork of mountain valleys, and your livelihood depends on being hired by foreign kings. The one thing you can truly control is how straight your seams run. And deep down, you know it works. Because when you marched into Milan last year, 500 men in perfect formation, every tunic sharp, every pike gleaming, the enemy surrendered before the second drum beat. No one wants to fight a man who's willing to press his clothes before stabbing you. By mid-morning, the sun finally crests the peaks, melting just enough snow to turn everything into a soup of slush and regret. Your boots squelch as you head back to your tent, still cradling the thought that maybe, just maybe, you'll sneak in a nap. But no, there's a new announcement being hollered across camp parade inspection. You groan quietly, because nothing gets Swiss mercenaries to panic clean like the word inspection. You duck into your tent, a saggy, half-collapsed triangle of waxed canvas, and immediately begin the ritual. Off comes the tunic. You hang it over the tent pole like it's a sacred tapestry. Your hose go next, draped neatly over a low-hanging rope. You take your linen undershirt, once white, now the color of wet bread, and give it a solid shake. It puffs out like a ghost with rickets. Your tent mate Ulrich stumbles in behind you, clutching a brush made from horsehair in desperation. "Is it true?" he asks, eyes wide. "They say a papal emissary is watching today." You blink. "Well, like a church guy." Ulrich nods solemnly, with a clipboard. "Well, that changes things. See, every once in a while, someone truly important passes through, a nobleman, a bishop, even a foreign prince, and the camp is expected to look like a pageant, not a battlefield. Every man, no matter how blood-stained or battle-weary, must become a walking advertisement for Swiss excellence. You begin brushing your hose with the intensity of a man cleaning a crime scene. Every speck, every fuzz must go. Then you re-smooth your tunic, crouched by the fire pit, and carefully warm a stone until it's just hot enough to press. You wrap it in cloth and run it along your sleeves, working out every last wrinkle like it insulted your family. This is field ironing at its most refined. Historically, we know Swiss regiments were known for field ingenuity. They carried no real luxuries, but they repurposed almost everything. Tent pegs doubled as cooking spits. Helmet plumes became emergency tinder. And as for keeping their clothes looking sharp, hot stones, metal pots, even the backs of shields were rumored to be used for pressing garments. It wasn't elegant, but it worked. You slip back into your uniform. You feel the heat from the freshly ironed wool against your chest. It's weirdly comforting, like you've done something right today. Outside, the clamor of the parade ground grows louder. Men are lining up by company tunics, billowing in the breeze like war flags. The sun is cruel, bright white, and unforgiving. It exposes everything: stains, sloppy stitches, faded dye. And the officers are already prowling like cats at a rat banquet. You take your place next to Ulrich. He smells like he bathed in vinegar and hope. His beard is combed. His boots gleam. Captain Barthold walks past, inspecting each man with a look of thinly veiled suspicion. He pauses beside you, looks you up and down. "Hem's crooked," he mutters. Your heart sinks. He moves on. You subtly adjust your hem with your thumb, cursing softly. Ulrich whispers. He does that to everyone. It's a power move. Still, you can't help but feel rattled. But then that's part of the culture. Swiss military inspections in the 1500s weren't just about uniforms. They were moral audits. Did you maintain your appearance? Did you show up clean? Was your armor polished? If yes, you were a man of discipline. If not, you were a risk to the group. The Swiss didn't believe in lone heroes. They believed in tight, unbreakable formations, each man trusting the next. Uniformity in dress wasn't vanity, it was visual unity. A seamless line of red and white jackets and halberds looked like a wall, an identity. Historians still argue whether this discipline originated in the mountain communities where survival meant tight-knit cooperation, or if it was drilled into them later by foreign employers like the French or Papal States. Either way, the result was the same: you dressed to impress, or you didn't march. The papal emissary finally arrives. You can't see him clearly from your position, but you catch a glimpse of silk and gold thread. He's absurdly overdressed for a battlefield. You half expect doves to burst out of his sleeves. He nods approvingly as the lines are called to attention. His scribe makes occasional notes. Someone sneezes, no one laughs. After what feels like hours, the inspection ends. The officers relax. The men exhale in relief. And you, glorious in your moderately pressed uniform, did not get fined, humiliated, or reassigned to dung duty. You call that a win, Later that afternoon, you and Ulrich sit outside your tent, sipping watered wine and watching a pair of younger soldiers sew patches onto their sleeves. Ulrich gestures with his tin cup. Remember when Heinrich ironed his tunic with a helmet and burned it clean through? You nod. He tried to patch it with cheesecloth. Didn't end well. You both chuckle. The day is winding down and the harsh sun is finally softening into something golden and sleepy. Your sleeves still hold their creases. The breeze is gentle. Your boots are mostly dry. It's not peace exactly, but it's close. By the time dusk begins to roll over the camp like a warm woolen blanket, you're back at your favorite place, the communal wash station, which despite the lofty title is really just a glacial stream with some rocks thoughtfully arranged to serve as wash basins. It's here that a great many battles are fought. Not with swords, mind you, but with soap and stubborn stains. Your tunic, which survived parade inspection with dignity intact, now bears a faint smear of onion broth and a suspicious splotch of something you'd rather not name. You kneel by the stream icy water, biting your hands, and begin the slow, meditative process of scrubbing. You're not alone. All around you, fellow mercenaries are elbow deep in laundry. One man is muttering curses at his own socks. Another is experimenting with using sand as a scouring agent. It's what the Egyptians did, he says, with the tone of someone who's just remembered a half-read scroll. Swiss troops had a curious relationship with cleanliness. While no one would confuse them for spa-goers, they took great pride in their appearance, especially in uniform. And while hygiene varied widely across Europe in the 16th century, there's solid evidence that Swiss companies encouraged regular washing, not just of bodies but of uniforms too. You remember the captain once explaining it with all the charm of a man trying not to lose his temper? You march into battle in filth, you die in filth. Look sharp, fight sharp. There's something oddly peaceful about laundering. The repetition, the rhythm, the squeak of cloth against rock. You scrub your sleeves with lye soap pungent stuff made from ashes and rendered fat. Your eyes water, but the grime gives way, slowly, reluctantly. Ulrich sits nearby, dipping his trousers in and out of the stream like he's fishing for compliments. I hear the Venetians use olive oil for stains, he says. You eye him. We don't have olive oil. He shrugs. I said I heard it. As the sun dips lower, a golden hue washes over everything. Tunics flutter like flags on nearby drying lines. A man in the next company plays a slow off-key tune on a wooden flute. For a few moments, the camp doesn't feel like a staging ground for war. It feels like a very damp village with exceptional laundry standards. You hold your tunic up to inspect it. The fabric, though worn thin at the elbows, looks decent. The red trim is still bold. You smooth it out with your hands, then carefully drape it over a heated stone still warm from the afternoon sun. It won't be perfectly flat, but it'll pass. Historians have long puzzled over the practicality of such textile care in military camps. Was it ritual? Was it morale? A bit of both. One theory suggests that the uniform routine gave soldiers something steady, something they could control amidst chaos. After all, battles were irregular. Marches could be delayed, but a man could always wash his shirt. And let's not forget the unspoken competition. Your company prides itself on being the sharpest dressed in the camp. A misplaced pleat could lose you a wager, or worse, your dignity. One guy famously stitched in decorative pleats just to one-up the captain. He ended up digging latrines for 3 days, but the pleats were magnificent. The wind begins to pick up, sending ripples across the stream. You retrieve your tunic carefully. It's still damp, but the fabric is smooth and smells, if not fresh, then at least neutral. You shake out the sleeves and begin carefully folding it. There's an art to it. You've watched tailors do it in market towns, one crisp fold down the middle, then tucked under so the collar sits flat. Of course, none of this folding matters if your tent collapses in the night. So you roll your tunic up and stuff it inside your bedroll, both as insulation and as a desperate attempt to keep it wrinkle-free. This is what passes for dry cleaning in the field. Ulrich finishes wringing out his socks. You know, he says, if we keep this up, we might be the first soldiers in history to die wrinkle-free. You chuckle. Tell that to the guy who tried to starch his cape with beer. Ah yes, Sir Frothy of House Sticky. There's an odd joy in these little jokes. They keep things light. Keep your mind off the fact that tomorrow might be another inspection or a long march, or if the captain's mood truly sours a day of pike drills so intense your arms feel like noodles. You hang your undershirt over the rope between tents. The wind catches it briefly, making it puff out like a ghost once more. You wonder idly if it will dry crooked. Probably. They always dry crooked. By now, the camp smells like a mix of lye soap smoke and roasted onions. Someone's cooking again, stew bubbling over a low fire. You hear laughter from a card game nearby. The mood is good for now. Historians still argue whether this insistence on tidy uniforms was unique to the Swiss, or if it stemmed from broader Renaissance ideas of order, balance, and symmetry. It may sound like overreach, but a well-folded tunic, a smooth seam, a clean collar. These were symbols of structure in a world that often veered into madness. And honestly, when the world outside is unpredictable, folding laundry with military precision starts to feel like rebellion or therapy. You finally settle down by the fire tunic, folded hose, hanging sleeves, aligned like soldiers at attention. Tomorrow, someone will probably spill stew on you. A goat might eat your sock again. But tonight, your uniform is clean, pressed, presentable. And in this strange world of mercenary contracts and muddy tents, that's enough to sleep well. The fire crackles gently beside you as twilight deepens the sky, shifting from dull pewter to a rich, velvety blue. Stars begin to peek through like curious onlookers blinking down at the peculiar theater below. Hundreds of grown men arguing over who last sharpened the soup ladle or whether it's possible to starch a codpiece. You lean back on your rolled cloak, warm from laundry duty belly, vaguely full from something that might have once been lentils, and take a long, slow breath. Tonight you have guard duty. Not exactly ideal, but at least it's first watch. You'll get the cold part out of the way early and still have a shot at sleep before sunrise. As the camp begins to quiet, you strap on your belt, pull your wool cloak tight, and make your way to the perimeter. Your halberd rests against a stump, and beside it, tucked under a rough wooden crate, is a tiny miracle, your polished boots. You slide them on slowly. The leather is stiff but warm, and they still carry the faint scent of beeswax and pine tar. You'd spent hours on them last week after an officer suggested half-jokingly that the Holy Roman Emperor himself could be inspecting footwear next. Now among the many duties, Swiss mercenaries took seriously polishing boots ranked surprisingly high. It wasn't just for looks, it was for preservation. In wet climates like Italy or Germany, cracked boots meant trench foot blisters or worse. And because Swiss troops marched more than they fought, footwear was as vital as a pike. Historical records even mention that certain Swiss companies carried communal tubs of boot grease. A mix of fat, ash, and resin, it repelled moisture, softened the leather, and allegedly worked as emergency torch fuel. One soldier legend claims used his flaming boot to light a siege tower. You're not sure you believe that one, but it's the kind of story people like Ulrich swear by. You reach your post near the southern edge of camp, just beyond a line of stunted birch trees. The moon is full tonight, lighting up the rolling hills beyond in silver gray. Somewhere out there, enemy scouts might be watching, or wolves, or most terrifying of all, your captain doing a surprise inspection of night sentries. You plant your halberd in the dirt and settle into the long tradition of guard duty stand. Listen, fidget, repeat. The silence here is different. Not empty, just patient. You hear the occasional murmur of men dreaming, the hoot of a distant owl, and the soft shifting of someone sneaking a third helping of stew. The night air is crisp and clean, tinged with wood smoke and pine. You look down at your cloak, freshly brushed. Someone embroidered a tiny sun into the inside seam. Probably the camp seamstress, or Ulrich, who once attempted to mend your collar and accidentally sewed his initials into it. There's a comforting rhythm to these small, almost domestic rituals. Polish the boots oil, the leather brush the cloak. In the absence of civilization, you create your own rules, your own routines. You iron tunics with hot rocks. You starch sleeves with leftover porridge. You sew sun shapes into wool just to remember warmth. And while historians debate the origins of such habits, some claim it stemmed from Alpine village pride. Others argue it was the influence of religious discipline from the Swiss Reformation. It's clear that even in a muddy encampment, Swiss mercenaries believed in showing up polished, pressed, and prepared. You shift your weight. The ground is hard, the cloak isn't quite thick enough, and your toes are beginning to tingle. Still, there's something strangely peaceful about this moment. No shouting, no drills, just the quiet, chilly company of yourself. Then footsteps. You grip your halberd tighter and lean forward. It's Ulrich, of course, holding a steaming mug of something deeply unidentifiable. Thought you might want company, he says, plopping down on a nearby stump, or at least a distraction from thinking too hard about wolves. You nod gratefully and take the mug. It's warm, smells vaguely of roasted barley and last week's stew. You take a sip. It's terrible, but warming. Ulrich peers up at the stars. You ever wonder if they had to polish their boots in ancient Rome? You chuckle. Probably. Just with olive oil and optimism. Historians should look into that, he mutters. They do. Constantly, they just argue about what kind of oil. You both sit in silence for a while, sipping the weird tea boots, polished cloaks wrapped tightly. The wind rustles through the trees with a dry, papery sound. Insects chirp. Somewhere a man snores like he's gargling gravel. There's something about this shared absurdity ironing uniforms, with stones washing socks and glacier runoff, guarding a moonlit field, while sipping lukewarm broth that feels like its own kind of victory. You're not warm, but you're not cold. You're not home, but you've made something like home. Eventually, Ulrich rises and dusts off his cloak. Don't fall asleep out here, he says. They'll dock your pay. You nod half laughing and resume your post. The stars seem to stretch wider now, and your boots miraculously still gleam in the moonlight. The halberd rests easily in your hand. You lean against it like a shepherd minding the edge of the world. Just a few more hours until sleep. In your uniform, still looking sharp. Sleep when it finally comes is shallow and interrupted, more of a truce than a victory. The kind of rest where your dreams take place in the same soggy tent you fell asleep in, except now your boots are speaking Latin, and your pillow keeps sliding into a ditch. You wake just before dawn, eyelids, gummy limbs, stiff. A thin mist snakes through the camp, curling around pike shafts and low fires, like it's looking for something it lost. Somewhere a rooster crows. You don't know whose rooster it is. No one owns a rooster. It just showed up 2 weeks ago and decided it lived here now. Your breath clouds in the morning chill as you tug on your hose and doublet. To your mild surprise, your tunic, carefully folded and tucked into your bedroll, has maintained most of its pressed shape. The sleeves have creased a little, but honestly, you've seen worse. A little smoothing with your palms and a few hard tugs at the hem, and you're ready to pass for competent. Breakfast is a gray porridge-like substance with the consistency of regret and the flavor of boiled sock. You chew slowly beside the fire while the camp begins its morning rituals. Weapons-checked wounds, repacked laundry lines assessed for theft. You overhear a few grumbles about today's schedule. Another long march is planned, and rumor has it we'll pass through a town. That means possibly a real bathhouse, or at least a stream wide enough to soak both feet in at once. Of course, that also means inspection. Now, Swiss mercenary inspections were not idle affairs. Officers were known to assess everything from pike alignment to fingernail cleanliness. One legendary captain allegedly sniffed tunics for freshness, though historians still argue whether that's apocryphal or just deeply unfortunate truth. You take a moment to double-check your kit. Buttons fastened, hose tied, cloak brushed down. You even run your comb crafted from bone and bought for a few pfennigs at a roadside stall through your hair. It doesn't do much, but the act of it feels important, like you're part of something structured despite the chaos. Around you, men are making similar adjustments. Ulrich is shaving with a sliver of bronze mirror and a tiny blade that looks more ceremonial than useful. Another man is furiously trying to buff a scuff off his boots with what appears to be a dead mouse. You chuckle quietly. This is how mornings work here. Groggy warriors fussing over wrinkles like seamstresses before a royal pageant. Not exactly how the history books frame the age of pike and powder. But this is the lived reality of Swiss mercenary life in the early 1500s. A life of contradictions, brutal yet tidy, harsh but oddly elegant. You sleep in mud, but by God, you do it in crisp pleats. Your captain appears like a summoned spirit, clean-shaven stern, wearing a doublet so sharp it could slice bread. His boots gleam, his gloves are spotless, and his scowl is the same as ever. Inspection intent, he growls. Tunic collars visible. No excuses. I will tug them myself. You scramble to attention, heart racing slightly. Not with fear exactly, but with the quiet pressure of performance. Because deep down part of you wants to be the one who gets a nod of approval, who earns that rarest of gifts, the captain's grunt of satisfaction. You line up with your unit shoulders, square hands behind your back. The morning mist clings to your eyelashes as the captain strides down the row, eyes scanning, fingers twitching at imaginary creases. He stops in front of Ulrich, that pin crooked. Ulrich freezes. No, sir. The captain stares at it, leans in, straightens it by a millimeter. says nothing moves on. Then it's your turn. He eyes your tunic, looks at your boots, lifts your cloak slightly, inspecting the hem. You hold your breath. He grunts. It is by all accounts a victory. Behind you, someone exhales with relief. Maybe it's you. Maybe it's everyone. Once inspection ends, the pace quickens. Tents are struck, packs, assembled pikes collected and slung over shoulders like long, angry fishing poles. The march begins under a pale sun that warms the mist into dew. The road is packed earth and stone, uneven but manageable. Birds chirp overhead as you fall into rhythm, with your steps boots thudding in unison with your companions. You glance down at your tunic as you walk. The movement causes it to bunch slightly at the hips. You tug at the hem now and then to smooth it out, an unconscious reflex by now. Somewhere near the middle of the column, a man starts singing a marching song. Others join in, out of tune but full of heart. It's an old alpine tune about goats, wine, and a particularly fickle wind. You think about how absurd this all must look from a distance, dozens of men in brightly trimmed uniforms, marching through mud, singing about cheese with polished boots and combed hair. And yet this was the face of professional soldiery in the Renaissance. The Swiss weren't just feared, they were respected. And that respect came from more than their discipline on the battlefield. It came from this obsessive care, these small acts of order. They dressed like soldiers. They stood like soldiers. They even marched like soldiers on parade, even when no one was watching. Historians continue to debate how much of this uniform culture was top-down instilled by captains and codes, and how much was bottom-up, born of pride, tradition, and alpine stubbornness. Most agree it was a bit of both. The uniform wasn't just a garment, it was a boundary. Between man and mud, between self and surrender. The sun climbs higher and the town finally appears on the horizon, a scatter of rooftops, a church spire, maybe even an inn with actual chairs. Your tunic is a little wrinkled now, the boots dusty, but still you're one of the better dressed people on this road, and you know exactly where you stashed your clean undershirt, just in case there's another inspection before dinner. The town welcomes you with the curious silence of people trying very hard not to look like they're staring. Children peek from behind doorways. Merchants pretend to sweep non-existent dust from their steps. An old woman drops an entire basket of onions in her haste to get out of the way. You can't blame them. A few dozen Swiss mercenaries marching in formation down your main road is probably not the relaxing kind of spectacle you want over your morning porridge. But to your surprise, this town isn't a heap of scorched ruins or abandoned carts. It's tidy, even pleasant. There's a fountain in the center square, a bakery still steaming with fresh loaves and glory of glories, a modest bathhouse, its wooden sign swinging lazily in the breeze. A painted tub and some very clean bubbles offer their wordless promise. Your company's captain barks a few orders, and soon the camp is setting up just outside the town walls. Tents rise in neat rows, equipment is stacked, and a designated mule no one knows whose is quickly elected quartermaster for the day by virtue of standing in the wrong spot. After the hard morning march, you're granted a half day to rest. This is rare, almost suspiciously so. Some soldiers immediately collapse into their bedrolls, boots still on. Others gamble, flirt poorly with the locals, or start building a fire for stew. You head straight for the bathhouse. Inside, the air is warm and damp. Steam coils around the rafters, and there's a smell of rosemary and wet pine. The walls are aged wood, the floor slightly warped, and a cat is asleep on a stack of folded linen. You've never been more jealous of a feline. You pay a few coins courtesy of your last paycheck, which came in the form of both silver and a dubious length of sausage, and step behind a wooden partition. Off come the boots, hose, tunic, shirt, and cloak. Your uniform lands in a careful pile, still crisp, still faintly smelling of starch and smoke. The bath itself is gloriously simple. A shallow, wide tub of warm water fed by a clay pipe from some nearby spring. You lower yourself in slowly, every muscle sighing. The water laps against your chest like a sleepy dog, and you close your eyes. Somewhere a lute plays, badly. You don't care. You soak until your fingers wrinkle and your thoughts start to float. This, you think, is the part of soldiering they never draw in the woodcuts. No battlefield glory, no waving banners. Just a tired man in a warm tub, wondering if he can dry his socks on a candle. You finally climb out, dried with linen that smells faintly of lavender and mildew. You pull your tunic on again, gently so as not to ruin the lines, and give it a final smoothing with your palm. You head back into the town square, feeling oddly regal. Bath fresh, boots clean, tunic dry. A walking contradiction. And that's when it happens. A local boy no older than 10 tugs on your cloak. His eyes are wide and his hands are covered in what looks like jam. He points to your sleeves. "Are you a prince?" he asks. You blink. "No," you say, "just a mercenary." "But your clothes are so neat." You laugh. "That's the idea." He runs off trailing sticky footprints and you stand there for a moment, letting the absurdity settle in. A prince indeed. But the boy's reaction makes a certain kind of sense. In an age when clothing was often a direct statement of rank, wealth, or sanity, a man with polished boots and a neatly pressed doublet did not go unnoticed, even if he smelled faintly of iron and old stew. In fact, Swiss mercenaries had become so known for their tidy appearance that some cities, notably in Italy, required them to walk through designated gates so locals could gawk respectfully from a distance. It was part intimidation, part performance. And historians still argue whether this obsession with presentation came from Swiss culture itself, rooted in alpine orderliness, or if it evolved as a deliberate form of psychological warfare. After all, an enemy who looks like he could host a banquet at any moment might be unnervingly confident. You make your way back to camp where Ulrich is lounging on a blanket, polishing his belt buckle with something that might be cheese. "Where have you been?" he asks. "Bathhouse." "Ooh, fancy." "I was mistaken for royalty." Ulrich nods sagely. "That's the starch. It gives you an aura." You settle beside him and pull out a loaf of hard bread, cracking it against your knee until it yields. The sun has climbed now, warm and gold, and the sound of distant bells rings faintly over the rooftops. Around you, the camp hums with low, lazy energy. Some men are stitching their sleeves, others cleaning weapons. One is asleep, face down in a bucket. The uniform work never stops, even in rest. The tunics must be brushed, the buttons checked, the hems mended. It's not vanity, it's duty. You think about that boy again, about how a clean tunic made you look like a prince. Maybe in a world of mud and hunger, clean clothes really are a kind of nobility. And maybe, just maybe, you'll find another hot stone later and give your sleeves a proper press before nightfall. The late afternoon sun slants across the camp like warm honey poured over bread, thick, golden, slow. The fires crackle, someone strums a lute again, still badly, and there's the rhythmic sound of someone sharpening a blade against a whetstone. But mostly it's peace. For now. You're stretched out on a blanket beside Ulrich, picking at a piece of jerky that might once have been beef or horse, or possibly a part of the saddle. A few other soldiers lounge nearby, swapping stories about impossible victories and very real blisters. It's during this lull, this lazy golden hour of the day, that the quartermaster begins his rounds. Now, a Swiss quartermaster is not a man to be trifled with. He is part bureaucrat, part mother, and part bloodhound. His nose can detect mildew at 50 paces. He can tell if your leggings are the wrong shade of blue just by squinting. He has the terrifying ability to remember who last returned their fire steel covered in bacon grease. And today he's doing the laundry inspection. You scramble to your feet, nod a quick goodbye to Ulrich, and make your way back to your tent, where your freshly washed undershirt is drying on a line made from bootlaces and misplaced optimism. It's still slightly damp. You shake it out, check it for lint, and then hang it nearer to the fire, hoping the warm breeze will finish the job. Then you go about your other small rituals, folding your cloak properly, lining up your socks, checking your belt for cracks. You're not alone in this frenzy. All around the camp, men are crouched like anxious squirrels, smoothing seams, threading cords, brushing invisible dust off their tunics. One man is desperately trying to re-dye his sleeves with crushed berries. Another has just discovered he accidentally swapped breeches with someone 3 sizes smaller and is trying to make it work with string. Swiss mercenaries may have been feared for their halberds and pikework, but behind every clean line and buttoned collar was a small war against the elements and against time. The quartermaster finally appears, his clipboard, well-waxed tablet tucked under one arm, a piece of charcoal at the ready. He wears a doublet so immaculate, you're convinced he's never sat down in his life. Undergarments, he says flatly, walking past each tent like a priest conducting a ritual. You hold yours up. It's dry, barely. He pinches the hem, gives a slow, theatrical sniff, and nods. Acceptable, he mutters, as if he's just tasted mediocre soup. You've passed. Ulrich, who arrives late to the inspection holding his damn shirt at arm's length like it might bite him, is less fortunate. "Smells of goat," the quartermaster declares. "Hang it again." "Everything smells of goat," Ulrich protests. "Not me," the quartermaster replies, moving on. This little theater of discipline isn't just for show. It's embedded in the Swiss approach to military life. Other mercenary companies like the Lanzknechts or the Italian condottieri may have focused more on bravado and flash. But the Swiss, they focused on systems, on order, on rows of tents as neat as ledger lines, uniforms as precise as bank records, and daily routines that bordered on obsessive. And historians still argue whether this relentless tidiness was purely practical clean clothes helped prevent lice after all, or if it was cultural, an extension of the Swiss love for precision. After all, this is the country that would one day invent the cuckoo clock. But in your time, the early 1500s, there are no clocks chirping the hour. Just the sun's position, the smell of stew drifting across the camp, and the rising sense that evening is near. You finish your chores and settle by the fire again, feeling oddly satisfied. There's something grounding about this routine, even comforting. A clean tunic, a neat tent, and the knowledge that your boots are pointed in the same direction as everyone else's. It creates a strange sense of peace. One of the younger soldiers plops down beside you. He's new, barely sprouted a beard, and still calls the sergeant sir, like a nervous schoolboy. Why do we even bother, he asks, tugging at his freshly starched collar. We'll just be covered in mud again tomorrow. You pause, think about it. Because mud washes off, you say, but looking like a mess sticks with you. He doesn't quite get it, but he nods anyway, because it sounds like something wise old soldiers say. As twilight thickens, the camp becomes quieter. The fires are lit, casting flickering shadows against tents. Someone hands out bowls of a thin stew that tastes slightly better than it looks, especially if you close one eye and pretend it's from a tavern in Bern. And as you eat, you notice something unusual. Several officers are wearing formal sashes. That can only mean one thing. Tomorrow is muster. That's the big one. Full review equipment checks, possibly a parade, definitely another inspection. And the quartermaster you just know will be in a mood. You glance at your uniform folded carefully at your side. It's clean now, but it'll need pressing again before dawn. You'll have to find another hot stone, maybe use two this time. Or if you're desperate, borrow Ulrich's trick and sleep with it under your cloak to warm it. There's always something, isn't there? You sigh, finish the last of the stew, and rise to your feet. There's work yet to do if you want to look like a prince in the morning. You retrieve your tunic from the tent. It's warm from the firelight and still faintly carries the scent of soap and smoke. Carefully, you lay it over a flat stone near the embers, tucking the sleeves just so. As you press down gently with another heated stone, you feel that old quiet pride return. Not in your weapons, not even in your rank, but in your sleeves. Because in a world where mud is everywhere, choosing to stay sharp crease by crease, stitch by stitch, feels like a kind of magic. Dawn comes quietly like a curtain being slowly drawn back. The sky shifts from indigo to pale pink, as if the world is trying not to wake you too suddenly. But you're already up, crouched beside the fire, coaxing a hot stone back to life, with a few strategic pokes and a deeply suspicious piece of kindling. Today is muster day. You'd like to say that your uniform is pristine, that the tunic you pressed last night looks like it belongs in the halls of some minor duke. But in truth, the fire scorched one edge, and a bird whose name and species you'll never know left its opinion on your shoulder flap sometime around midnight. Still, you fix what you can. You dab the mess with water and ash. You smooth out the edge. You find a stick with just the right curve to thread through a fold and hold the collar upright. As you dress, you feel the way soldiers have always felt before a formal inspection, anxious, itchy, and faintly betrayed by your socks. Outside, the camp stirs. Men are lacing up jerkins, tying sashes, adjusting weapons. The more experienced among you have already boiled their boots to soften the leather. Ulrich is gnawing on the end of a belt, trying to remove a wine stain with his teeth. Morning, he mumbles through the strap. Your sash is on backwards, you reply. Bold fashion choice, he says and shrugs. By the time the sun clears the horizon, the entire company is in formation, rows upon rows of mercenaries standing at attention, their halberds glinting, their boots aligned like a parade of modestly dressed beetles. You take your spot spine straight, chin up, resisting the urge to fidget. The officers move down the lines with the slow gravity of men who know exactly how much power they have and how much longer they can drag this out. The captain's cloak billows slightly, his boots polished to a shine that suggests he has access to magic, or at least beeswax. And trailing just behind him, clipboard in hand, eyes narrowed like a hawk with indigestion, is the quartermaster. You swallow. This is where everything matters, the angle of your sleeves, the state of your boots, the alignment of the buttons on your doublet. A loose thread is not just a thread today, it's a statement about your soul. The quartermaster pauses in front of you. He gives your tunic a long, slow once-over. He frowns. You consider fainting. His hand reaches out. He brushes your sleeve. His thumb smudges a tiny soot mark near your elbow. Then he exhales, deep, resigned, philosophical. Passable, he mutters. You nearly collapse from relief. Ulrich, unfortunately, is not so lucky. Why is your sash tied like a pretzel? The quartermaster demands, stopping 3 paces down. It's a Swiss knot, Ulrich replies proudly. It's a disgrace to geometry. The inspection continues, eventually giving way to the muster proper. The captain gives a speech, something about discipline contracts and the honor of wearing a tidy tunic in the service of order and coin. You don't really hear it. Your mind is drifting now, floating somewhere between the rhythmic clink of pikes and the morning bird song. But you stand straight proud all the same. Because in this moment, you're not just some tired, underpaid foot soldier with blistered feet and dreams of cheese. You're part of a tradition. A strange, starched, and mildly neurotic tradition, but a tradition nonetheless. Swiss mercenaries didn't just show up and stab things. They marched like clockwork. They wore matching colors. They represented something more than brute force. They were brand ambassadors for an entire philosophy that order, preparation, and the right crease in your sleeve could win battles before the fighting even started. And historians still debate just how deliberate this image was, whether the Swiss cultivated it for practical reasons or whether it grew naturally from their mountain communities where survival demanded both cooperation and relentless tidiness. Some argue it was pure strategy, intimidate the enemy with your discipline. Others think it was simply pride, or maybe it was both. All you know is that your shoulders feel a little straighter when your collar sits just right. The muster ends without incident. The captain nods his approval. The quartermaster looks vaguely disappointed that no one burst into flames, and then finally you are dismissed. The company relaxes, helmets come off, cloaks are slung over shoulders. Someone starts handing out crusts of bread that might have been legally classified as weapons in another town. You sit back down beside Ulrich, who is still fussing with his sash. I think I've invented a new style, he says. I think you've committed a fashion crime. Maybe both. A few others gather nearby, laughing, complaining, trading rumors. Someone claims the next march will take you across the Alps again. Someone else says Venice is hiring. A third says there's a noblewoman in the next town who pays mercenaries to carry her parasol and whisper poetry. You all agree this is probably a lie, but it's a good one. You stretch out on the grass, sun on your face, your uniform just beginning to wrinkle again, but somehow that's okay now. For today you looked sharp. You passed muster. You reminded the world and yourself that even a soldier can have style. A breeze lifts the hem of your tunic and you catch it just in time. It smells faintly of smoke starch and victory. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to rest, just for now. It's the day after muster and your tunic already looks like it was used to mop a wine cellar. Not that anyone's judging. Today is what the company calls a soft day. No marching, no drills, no inspections, just mending, resting, sharpening, and for some recovering from drinking contests that got very emotional very quickly. You've taken over a patch of grass under a stunted tree trying to stitch a rip in your collar with thread that keeps breaking and a needle that might actually be a splinter. Around you, the camp hums gently with quiet tasks. There's the soft rasp of blades on whetstones, the rhythmic thunk of a smith tapping out dents in a breastplate, and the low drone of a soldier trying to sing a Swiss ballad that sounds like someone mourning a lost cow. Your fingers are sore, the sun is warm, and for the first time in a while you feel something close to content. That is until a new figure arrives at the edge of camp, leading a donkey loaded with bolts of fabric. You don't know this man, but you know his type. He's a peddler, a textile one, judging by the gleam in his eye, and the way he gestures toward his cart like it's the holy grail made of wool. The company buzzes. Word spreads quickly, new cloth, fresh dyes, imported trimmings. Even Ulrich sits up from where he was napping in the dirt, wiping his face and squinting toward the merchant like a prairie dog who's heard the dinner bell. You follow the crowd because, of course you do. It's not every day you see fabric from Bruges or velvet from Milan in the middle of a field. The merchant is already holding up swatches and extolling their virtues in an accent that's part Italian, part French, and part nonsense. This he says, lifting a swatch of shocking yellow as the color of imperial favor. Ulrich leans over. Looks like the color of egg yolk left out too long. I'll take 2, you reply without meaning to. The truth is mercenaries, even rough, muddy halberd-toting ones, love fashion. Or at least they love making an impression. Your uniform might be standardized, your rank might be set, but a bit of extra flair, that's where a man could shine. It was common in the 1500s for soldiers to alter their uniforms with slashes and ribbons, embroidery and dyes. Some wore feathers, some wore bells. One man in the rear ranks once stitched tiny mirrors onto his sleeves so he could reflect the sun into the eyes of the enemy, though mostly he just startled birds. Historians still argue whether this trend was sanctioned or merely tolerated. Did captains turn a blind eye to keep morale high? Or was it all part of an unofficial code? Look good, feel good, fight better. You don't know. But what you do know is that a swatch of emerald green just caught your eye, and you're wondering if it would work as a lining for your cloak. You barter with the peddler 2 buttons, a spoon, and an old shoe buckle you swear is silver. He accepts because peddlers always accept. Somehow you walk away with fabric and a story about how the shoe buckle once belonged to a Bavarian prince. Probably untrue, but it's a good story. Back at your tent, you spread the cloth out, imagining what it might become: a cuff, a collar, a ridiculous hat. Ulrich suggests matching armbands. You scoff, then consider it, then scoff again. The next few hours pass in a blur of creativity and thread. Men around the camp are doing the same hemming, slashing, sewing on tassels, like they're auditioning for a Renaissance-themed opera. Some go subtle, a strip of color at the edge of a sleeve. Others go bold. One man is now wearing a tunic so purple he looks like royalty's errant cousin. And all this, mind you, without breaking the rules. The uniform's base remains intact. The trimmings, just enhancements. You finish your own project just before dusk, a neatly sewn inner lining of bright green under your otherwise plain gray cloak. It flares slightly when you walk, like a secret only visible in motion. It's ridiculous, and it's perfect. As the evening deepens, fires are lit again, and someone starts roasting onions on a spit. You sit beside Ulrich, who's fashioned a truly hideous but oddly charming pair of shoulder tassels. They make me look dangerous, he insists. You look like you lost a fight with a curtain. He smiles proudly, a noble curtain. This, more than any training drill or pay bonus, lifts the spirits of the men. The laughter, the self-expression, the quiet pride in turning rags into regalia. In a job where so much is out of your control, weather pay orders, it feels good to decide something, even if it's just the color of your cuffs. And maybe that's why Swiss companies earned such reputations, not just for discipline, but for morale. They made room for expression, for community, for vanity and pride, and a bit of utterly unnecessary embroidery. You lean back, cloak tucked around you, the green edge catching the last flicker of firelight. Tomorrow might bring marching or a new contract or just more stitching. But tonight, under the stars with onions sizzling and terrible singing in the background, you feel like yourself. Not just a mercenary, but a well-dressed one. The next morning begins with a trumpet blast so off-key it sounds more like a goose being mugged. You sit up with a groan, brushing grass from your face, and trying to remember if you slept in your cloak on purpose or because you lost your blanket in a bed. Again. There's movement in the camp. Packs are being loaded, tents are being folded, and somewhere a man is angrily accusing a sausage of betrayal. It's a travel day. The company is moving on destination uncertain, but rumored to involve mountains, a tavern, and possibly a bishop who needs someone intimidated. You stretch, yawn, and begin the deeply personal ritual of packing your few belongings. Your polished tunic, your cloak with the green lining, your carefully bundled bits of thread and spare buttons. The uniform may have rules, but personal flair that travels with you. As you move, a younger recruit, barely old enough to grow a mustache that can be seen in candlelight, approaches looking sheepish. "Sir," he says. You glance behind you, assuming he's talking to someone else. "No, I mean you." "Sorry, how do you keep your sleeves from sagging?" You blink, then grin. "Well, you say I use a bit of trickery, a few stitches here, and I press them with a warm rock wrapped in cloth. Helps hold the crease." He nods with the intensity of someone being handed the keys to life itself. "Thanks," he says, and scurries off to find his own magical rock. You never thought you'd be giving fashion advice in a military camp, but here we are. The march begins after breakfast, which mercifully is warm bread and a weak but drinkable tea. You fall into line with the others, your halberd slung comfortably over one shoulder, the fabric of your uniform rustling, just so with each step. There's a rhythm to it all. March a step breath. And for once everyone looks decent. Not perfect, but tidy, intentional. Even Ulrich, whose sash now matches his leggings, has a sort of chaotic elegance going. As the company snakes its way through a narrow mountain pass, the terrain becomes more treacherous. Rocks slide underfoot, the air grows thinner. Every now and then a goat bleats from a cliffside with what can only be interpreted as judgment. But you press on, and here's where it gets interesting. You see, Swiss mercenaries weren't just known for battlefield discipline or tailoring flair. They were also famed for their ability to move quickly, efficiently across landscapes that would make lesser armies weep into their maps. Their gear was compact, their packs were light, and their clothes, yes, even the pressed ones, were designed for movement. Take those famous slash sleeves, for example. Sure, they looked dramatic, but they also allowed more flexibility. The air circulated better. Layers could be added or removed depending on the weather. Historians still debate whether these features were born from necessity or style, or as always both. There's something reassuring about that as you scramble up a narrow path worn into the rock. Your cloak catches the breeze. Your boots, while not luxurious, grip the stones with the stubbornness of a goat in debt. A call comes from a head halt. You stop, heart beating fast, dust on your face. The captain raises a hand, peering down into the valley below. You crane your neck. It's a town, small, nestled beside a sparkling river. Red roofs, a stone church, a market square. And this is important visible smoke from several chimneys, which hopefully means stew. Camp tonight, the captain calls back. A cheer rises low but unmistakably joyful. You descend into the valley, boots thudding now on softer ground uniforms, already collecting flecks of green from the high grass. There's always that moment when a marching army stops being a threat and becomes a novelty. Villagers peeking from doorways, children trailing behind you wide-eyed. Some brave soul even points at your cloak and says something admiring in a dialect you half understand. Ulrich elbows you. See the greenworks. You smile, exhausted but proud. The company makes camp just outside the town walls. The tents go up like clockwork. Fires are started, and soon you're sitting beside a cauldron of something vaguely edible, surrounded by your comrades recounting the day's terrain like it was an epic poem. But then comes the final ritual, brushing down the uniforms. Yes, again, because no matter how far you've marched, how steep the trail, or how muddy the road, the uniform still matters. It's the last thing you tend to before sleep. A quick shake, a bit of brushing, maybe a dab of water, and a flat stone. It's not vanity, not exactly. It's identity, it's routine, it's comfort. A reminder that even in the middle of nowhere, under the open stars covered in dust and sweat and soup, that wasn't really soup, you're still you. Still a soldier, still Swiss, still sharp. As the fire crackles low and the stars blink above you, lie back, hands behind your head, boots kicked off, cloak wrapped tight. You hear someone nearby humming a lullaby you haven't heard since you were too small to hold a halberd. You smile. Tomorrow might bring a job or a skirmish or another climb. But tonight the mountain breeze smells sweet. Your sleeves are smooth and the world is quiet. Sleep comes easy. Dawn arrives without ceremony. No trumpet this time, just the soft bleating of a goat that seems entirely too judgmental for someone without a uniform. You blink awake beneath your cloak, eyes adjusting to the golden hue rising over the valley. The morning is crisp, almost polite. For a moment you forget where you are. Then you stretch and remember exactly where you are, on a slope just outside a sleepy town, with boots that still smell faintly of last night's stew, and a cloak that might have served as a blanket, towel, and tablecloth all in one. The company stirs slowly. A few men grumble. Someone groans loudly enough to be theatrical. Ulrich mutters something about his hip being haunted. The usual. But today's different. There's word from the captain the town's holding a small procession, a religious holiday, though no one's quite sure which one. Something about a local saint who once convinced a wolf not to eat someone's leg. The details don't matter. What matters is that the mercenary company has been asked to walk in it as guests. You arch a brow, us in a parade. Ulrich snorts. Guess they've never seen us dance. The captain, in his eternal wisdom, agrees on one condition: everyone must look sharp. No muddy boots, no mismatched socks, no visible wine stains. You're representing the company now, not just yourselves. And just like that, the camp becomes a flurry of grooming activity. Halberds are polished until they shine like church silver. Beards are trimmed with small knives and big hopes. And uniforms, the uniforms are ironed within an inch of their thread count. You set to work on yours, pulling out the same trusty warm stone technique you've been using since the rainy campaign in Zug. A flat rock warmed by the morning fire, wrapped in cloth, and pressed slowly over each sleeve. It's not perfect, but it smooths out the wrinkles and gives your tunic that satisfying crispness that makes you feel like you're about to win something. Your cloak's green lining, still impeccable. A passing soldier actually stops to ask how you kept it from fraying. Magic, you say, and walk away before he can ask follow-ups. Historians still debate whether this kind of company pride stemmed from Swiss culture itself, or was cultivated on the road, born out of boredom, maybe, or the need for self-worth in the chaos of mercenary life. Either way, the results were clear. Swiss mercenaries didn't just fight well, they looked like they fought well. You gather near the town gate. The villagers have lined up flowers in baskets, banners fluttering from windows. The priest leading the procession wears a hat so tall it may need its own chair. Children scamper around with bells. And then there's you and your comrades, an entire line of mercenaries in pressed gray wool and polished boots, standing at solemn attention like holy statues that could also beat you at arm wrestling. You step into the procession. There's no drum beat, no chanting, just the soft clink of gear, the rustle of uniforms, and the occasional gasp from onlookers as they realize these are soldiers. But not the kind they feared. You look dignified, sharp, human. There's an older woman who reaches out and touches your sleeve like it might bless her. A boy waves. Someone offers a flower, which Ulrich takes, and then immediately tries to figure out where it might look best on his belt. You glance around, surprised at how quiet and gentle it all feels. Not like a parade. More like a kind of communion. These townspeople with their patched clothes and wide eyes likely thought of mercenaries as brutes, thieves, lawless ruffians. Today you're rewriting that image one crease at a time. And the truth, you're proud of it. The walk ends in the church square where bread is handed out and wine is blessed and very quickly unblessed through drinking. There's music soft and strange drifting from a pair of traveling minstrels who appear to be playing lute and pan flute simultaneously. It's impressive and slightly unnerving. You sit on the steps of a well cloak fanned around you, watching the village swirl with laughter and life. Someone's child offers you a chunk of honey bread. You accept it like a knight taking a sacred relic. Ulrich joins you now, sporting the flower behind one ear. You know he says this might be the fanciest day we've ever had without anyone getting stabbed. You nod. Feels unnatural. He smiles. I could get used to it. That evening back at camp, the company relaxes around low fires. Boots off, belts loosened, a general atmosphere of lazy contentment thick in the air. Someone hums a tune from the procession. Another tosses his flower into the flames, only for it to somehow land in a bowl of stew. You sit beside your pack, carefully folding your uniform, not just out of habit, but out of respect. Because today your pressed sleeves did more than hold their shape. They held a story of discipline, of dignity, of 1,000 little choices, ironing instead of shrugging, polishing instead of patching, walking tall even when no one expects it. And as the fire crackles low and the stars begin their slow blink, you lie down again, the green lining of your cloak fluttering in the breeze like a quiet secret flag. Another day, another surprise. You're starting to think being a mercenary isn't just about swinging a weapon. Sometimes it's about showing the world that yes, even soldiers care about seams. The next day you wake up to the sound of rain. Not the thunderous end-of-days sort that soaks through every layer in 5 seconds flat, but the soft, persistent kind that taps on canvas and patters on cloaks. It's the sort of rain that makes everything feel slower, quieter, and vaguely philosophical. You sit up beneath your tent flap and peer out. Mist clings to the grass like a shy child. The fire is struggling, puffing like it has opinions. Across the camp, a few early risers are already up, muttering about wet socks and damp bread. You pull your cloak tighter and sigh. Today was supposed to be a supply run. You were looking forward to dry cheese and maybe bartering for a better belt buckle. Now it looks like you'll be bartering for dry kindling. Still, the show must go on, or rather the uniform must go on. You lay out your tunic and sigh again. It's wrinkled. The rain has stolen your crispness. The sleeves have lost their elegant arch. Your once pristine collar droops like a disappointed goose. You're not alone in this struggle. Ulrich appears, hair flattened by rain, holding up a soggy sock, like it personally betrayed him. My left boot sounds like a duck when I walk, he announces and then demonstrates. It does sound like a duck with regrets. Despite the weather, you and your comrades begin your routines. Cloth-wrapped stones are reheated beside what little fire survives. Tents are turned into makeshift ironing stations. You naturally attempt to press your sleeves while crouched under an overhang, shielding your work like it's a medieval state secret. And perhaps it is. After all, it's not just the rain that's a threat, it's what the rain reveals. Because now more than ever, you realize something: the uniform isn't the only thing being smoothed. It's you. This daily ritual of straightening, pressing, adjusting, it's not just about appearances. It's about keeping order when the world insists on unraveling. It's a rebellion not of weapons but of fabric. Historians still argue whether Swiss mercenaries developed their legendary discipline because of their culture or because they had to survive in a world where no one else expected it from them. But you're starting to believe it was both. Because in this moment, sitting under a wet canvas flap, ironing your sleeves with a stone, warmed by a sputtering fire, you feel it. That strange, stubborn dignity. That impulse to still care, even when everything else is falling apart. Especially then. By midday, the rain lightens. The fire regains some confidence. You trade a button from your spare pouch for a bit of dry cloth. Ulrich manages to fashion a temporary poncho out of a wine sack and a prayer. You press your tunic one last time and hold it up. Not bad. Not perfect, but not bad. In the afternoon, the captain announces a change of plans. A dignitary from a nearby abbey is passing through, and the company has been asked to provide an honor guard. You blink. Again, Ulrich groans. Why do these important people always show up after we've been rained on? You smile. At least your boot matches the mood. Still, orders are orders. The honor guard assembles. You stand at attention by the roadside halberds' gleaming uniforms, pressed as best they can be given the circumstances. The sun even makes a brief appearance, like it's trying to apologize for earlier. Then over the hill comes the abbey cart. It's less of a cart and more of a portable library on wheels. Scrolls and books poke out of every side. The dignitary himself, an older man with eyebrows that have clearly never heard the word trim, nods in your direction. He dismounts, eyes scanning the line. And then, remarkably, he smiles. Ah, he says Swiss discipline. Even the rain doesn't crumple it. You try not to grin. Ulrich tries not to giggle. The man moves on. But that sentence stays with you. It's not about vanity or ego or proving anything. It's about being a crease in the chaos. A little neatness in a messy world. That evening, you and the others dry your cloaks by the fire. Someone passes around a bit of roasted onion. Someone else shares a story about the time he tried to iron his collar with a spoon and a candle. You sit back, hands behind your head, and look at the stars. They're clearer now, sharper. Maybe your sleeves aren't perfect tonight. Maybe your boots still squish. But you stood tall, you looked sharp, and someone noticed. That's worth a little wrinkle. The hills around the valley are beginning to blush with autumn. Leaves rustle like silk as they fall, and the mornings have started to bite just a little. You wake today not to birds or goats, but to the sound of someone muttering angrily about missing buttons. Gone, Ulrich huffs, holding up his doublet as if it had personally betrayed him. The entire middle row just vanished, probably eaten by moths or jealousy. You sip lukewarm tea from a dented tin cup and try not to laugh. His belly now protrudes from the gap like a proud bread roll. It's a bold look you offer, very avant-garde. He sighs and tugs his cloak closed. Let's just hope today's assignment doesn't involve bending over. But as fate would have it, today's task involves a hill and a vineyard, and a very specific arrangement of barrels that somehow needs guarding because the local lord fears sabotage. Not from enemies, mind you, but from rival vintners. Swiss politics you see is never just swords and snow. And so with iron sleeves and bootlaces double knotted, you find yourself patrolling rows of sleepy grapevines. The scent is intoxicating, crushed fruit, damp earth, the faintest whiff of fermenting ambition. The barrels themselves sit like squat little generals beneath a tarp waiting for inspection. Your task is simple: look official, look alert, and most importantly, look sharp. Because the local vintner's daughter is watching, and not just watching, sketching. You glance over casually. She's seated on a barrel sketchbook in lap charcoal, dancing across the page. She's capturing the mercenaries, your company of all people, as if you're subjects in a Renaissance painting. You adjust your cloak, angle your halberd just slightly. You're not vain exactly, but if you're going to be immortalized in graphite, you may as well look good. She catches your eye and smirks. Nice boots. You nod solemnly. Ironed this morning. Historians still debate whether Swiss mercenaries were aware of their image, or if their visual discipline simply stemmed from habit. But standing there, sleeves just so collar crisp against the breeze, you're keenly aware of the effect. The rest of the day drifts by in lazy patrols. You and Ulrich take turns reciting psalm fragments and debating whether grapes make better wine or jelly. He insists jelly is underrated in military rations. You counter with wine's proven ability to improve dance skills. In between rounds, you polish a stubborn crease from your cuff using a smooth river rock. You've named the rock Ernst, don't judge. Later that afternoon, the Lord arrives. He's tall, fur-lined, and allergic to humility, accompanied by two men whose sole job seems to be agreeing with everything he says. He walks the barrels, nods, gestures vaguely toward the vines, and then stops. At you. You blink. He tilts his head. Your uniform. Sir, he waves a ringed hand. Exceptionally maintained. Shame the rest of them don't match your detail. You feel a dozen sets of eyes burn into your shoulders. Ulrich grins behind the Lord's back. Thank you, you reply with what you hope is the right balance of pride and deference. He moves on. His entourage follows. Ulrich sidles up beside you. You know if this war stuff doesn't work out, you could always be a mannequin. You smirk, only if I get hazard pay for standing still. That evening, the vintner's daughter returns with the sketch. She hands it to you without ceremony. It's beautiful, dramatic, slightly exaggerated in the jaw area, but you're not complaining. You look like a hero. She shrugs. You ironed, you earned it. You roll the paper carefully and tuck it into your pack like treasure. By the fire, the company gathers drying socks and nursing aches. Someone begins carving new buttons from plum wood for Ulrich. Someone else hums a tune from their hometown, one of those sleepy looping melodies that makes you feel like time is slowing down. You press your sleeves again, not because you must, but because you can. Because the act itself is a tether, something solid in a world of shifting allegiances and squishy boots. You think of the barrels, the girl, the Lord, all different. All saw the same thing, a soldier who cared. It might not make history books, but it's part of your story, and maybe that's enough. The wind shifts today. Not just a breeze, but a proper autumn wind, the kind that carries wood smoke and whispers. It snakes through the valley, tugging at cloaks, rattling loose tent flaps, and making even the most battle-worn halberds hum slightly in their sheaths. You're on early watch, again perched near the edge of camp, with a view of the lake below. It's just after dawn, and the water is still so still that your reflection armor and all seems almost sculpted from pewter. You stretch, rubbing a kink from your neck, and notice something strange. Everyone else in camp is already awake. Not groggily, fumbling for boots, but up, dressing, grooming, even dare you believe it, ironing. You blink at the surreal scene. There's Heinrich, normally the last to care about such things, smoothing his cuffs with a hot spoon. Karl is combing his mustache with the meticulousness of a courtier. Someone else is even holding their leggings up to the light, checking for invisible specks. It's beautiful. Ulrich appears at your elbow. Did I miss the royal parade announcement? You shake your head. No, just something's different. He nods, chewing a piece of dried pear. It's the general. Ah yes, the general. You'd heard the rumors, a rare inspection from one of the old lions, those decorated tacticians who hadn't stepped onto a battlefield in years. His visit was meant to be symbolic, a nod to the past, but now suddenly it's become something more. There's a buzz to the air, not fear, not quite excitement, just awareness. Everyone's standing taller, moving slower, straightening lines that have been crooked for weeks. And you feel oddly calm. You reach into your pack, take out your tunic already pressed last night, and give it one last smoothing pass with Ernst, your Riverstone. You smile. It's become a ritual now, like prayer or coffee. Historians still debate whether rituals like these were practical or performative. But standing here on the edge of a hill with mist licking at your boots, you realize it doesn't matter. What began as vanity has become identity, a rhythm, a code. The general arrives just after midday, escorted by 4 riders who look carved from salt and time. He dismounts slowly, surveying the camp with the detachment of someone who's seen every war, every betrayal, every soggy trench. And then he sees your unit. You are lined up in silence, uniforms crisp, halberds polished, no one speaks. The general approaches. He's shorter than you imagined, broader too. His eyes flick across your tunics, the symmetry of your cuffs, the gleam of a boot here, a belt buckle there. Then he stops in front of you. You meet his gaze chin level. The wind flutters your collar slightly. You resist the urge to adjust it. He raises a thick eyebrow. Then he says simply, "You look like you mean it." You nod. "We do, sir." He walks on. Ulrich exhales beside you, and it sounds suspiciously like relief. That night, the general stays for dinner. No formal speeches, just firelight bowls of onion stew and the soft clink of wooden cups. He tells stories about the old days, battles fought with frozen bread rolls, duels ended by sheep bites. You laugh along warm and full and entirely yourself. Later, as the stars prick holes in the sky and most of the camp turns in, you sit by the last glowing log. The general approaches quietly and sits beside you. "You're the one they call press collar, aren't you?" he says with a sideways grin. You chuckle, guilty. He nods slowly. "Never underestimate the power of appearances. Half the battles I won began because the other side thought we had our act together." You nod. "And the other half?" He grins. "We actually did." You sit together in silence a while longer. Then he pats your shoulder and rises. You remain there as the fire dies, the last sparks lifting into the air like fireflies in retreat. You think of everything of steam, and stones of campfires, and collars of rainstorms and ruined socks. And through it all, this one peculiar truth. In an age of chaos, the smallest discipline, pressing a tunic, straightening a seam, can become an act of quiet defiance, of dignity, of remembering who you are even when the world forgets. You smile and run your fingers over your now slightly wrinkled sleeve. Perfect. And now you settle in. The stars above blink more slowly now, like they too are ready for rest. The last sounds of camp, low laughter, the distant creak of wood, the sigh of tired leather fade into a gentle hush. The fire is just glowing embers now, casting a soft golden warmth across the backs of your eyelids. You feel your muscles relax one by one from the soles of your feet up to your jaw. Even your thoughts begin to smooth out like linen under a warm stone. You think back over the journey, the rain, the uniforms, the endless ironing, the proud glances, the sideways jokes, the feeling of standing tall, not for glory, not for praise, but simply because it felt right. Because it reminded you that you are still in control of something, however small, in a world that rarely offers guarantees. And now there's no need to press anything. No need to stand guard. No one is watching. No one needs anything from you right now. Just let the stillness settle over you like a soft cloak. Let the night wrap around your shoulders warm and heavy, filled with the scent of wood smoke and quiet triumph. You've done enough. You've stood straight. You've smoothed the wrinkles. Now it's time to lie back. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the wind. Let sleep find you slowly, gently, like a worn blanket pulled over your shoulders by an old friend. And if you dream, maybe it'll be of misty hills, soft fabric, and boots that never quite stop squishing. Good night, soldier.